Yeah, so
realized
like
I'm gonna
an
record.
integration, but it's a slightly different thing, kind of.
Okay, it sounds like it almost came out of the like kind of the same idea, but they realized they couldn't do it with the same integration profile, and so yeah, um, but yeah, it sounds like both things have gotten like a fair amount of traction and more than a few beta testers, so maybe they're working like pretty okay. Um, but well, that's cool. Okay, so that is a to link. So it's like EBSCOnet acquisitions info. Um, okay. Um, all right. Well, thanks, Kirsty. Yeah, I didn't actually end up talking to that many like other college folks, so I didn't like get the tea. Um, so so it's interesting to hear that. Although, I mean, if anyone was going to do something, Georgia has made some big moves in the area of higher ed. I think it was 4 years ago they combined all of their like Atlanta community colleges into a single institution and then condensed programs. So instead of having, because they had like 15 schools and they had 14 auto tech and 13 dental hygiene and 10 journalism, and they basically were like, nope, we're just going to consolidate and like do regional. And so it like shut down a bunch of student newspapers, which is how I heard about it. But it was basically the only way they could save their colleges at all. So I'm not surprised that they were able to make a similar pivot and decide to go away from Ex Libris because they've kind of have a history of making those big moves. Anyone else want to share something?
I had all sorts of cool stuff that I got to see. One of the things that I thought was really interesting, I went to Developers Day and there were probably 5 sessions in there that were like, oh my gosh, this would be amazing. And now I have to learn Python, or I have to learn, Angular and both, that kind of thing. But one of the things that came out of that, there was a guy who had written some Python script and using APIs had gone in and found a way to, let's say your librarians have gone into Primo and used, basically created, favorites and used a tag like, psychology or, automotive or whatever it is that they create essentially a list for, to export that in different formats, including to export it and have it published in LibGuides without having to add each book individually, which would save, I know, my librarians a lot of time. They really hate doing that. So I'm going to try and look more into that, but it was a really cool application. But again, I'm probably going to have to start to get familiar with SQL. So, or not SQL, Python, although I need to get familiar with SQL too. So, but it was really cool. One of the conversations that kind of came out of that also was the concept of a new book list, the way that we trying to create a new book list is not always the easiest thing, especially if you're trying to do like a newsletter or that kind of thing, pulling it out of Primo and having it be pretty with the synthetics pictures and all of that stuff isn't necessarily easy. And so while this would only do the Primo last 30 days, you could potentially alter it to have like the last 30 days and it just update, because that's the other thing, is it automatically updates. So if a faculty or your librarian goes in and takes a book off the list and adds some new books to the list, they don't have to change the LibGuide, it automatically updates that list. So it's an active and live list pulling from Primo. So that was one really cool thing that I saw. I have a bunch of other things, but I'll go into that later.
Well, and on the new books front, I also, and I wonder if it's using a Python script or what, but, and I already told Melinda about this one, but East Tennessee built a widget in their LibGuide that is pulling new books into like the visual little the gallery view thing. So I'm gonna go, and of course the person doing that presentation was the SpringShare person. So she was just giving like pointing us to the people who had created these cool integrations, which is fine because I'll just go to East Tennessee and figure out how it is they did it, or I'll look in the LibGuides community and then should be able to duplicate and tweak, because I certainly am much better at coding in LibGuides than in Python. So yeah, and I think I even found I was in another session that talked about doing new book stuff. So it's definitely like an area where people have found multiple solutions. So we, might be able to, if you don't have LibGuides, there might be other things, and there might even be things that aren't as sophisticated as the Python and API script. So I'm excited to create some of those more like user forward, user facing findability things. That seemed to be, did anyone else find that to be like, I was surprised at the amount of stuff that was like patron facing. Maybe I just like was really only looking at the discovery sessions, but it seemed to be a lot of usability and findability and making Alma work for Primo to make it work for students. Yeah, but
I'll chime in because I don't have anything to compare to. This is my first time going. And I was at Developers Day with Melinda and others, and it was like way over my head. So I did see a couple of usability sessions, and I want to give a plug for a lightweight usability testing that some folks did with instructional design principles, kind of fueling their prompts and how they responded, really centering the students' experience in decisions that they'd make about the changes to Primo V, but also workflow kind of in the background to be able to have the best experience. So I don't know if that was common to a lot of others or it's not, common to the past, but I thought it was really great because as I was sitting there at Developers Day, like, same as Melinda, like, oh, I got to learn Python. I dropped that class because it was really hard, but I'll get there. So I would go to their websites, the presenters' websites, and I would look at what is their library's web presence looking like? What does their Primo VE look like? And they got some work to do still to make those changes. So they might have been talking about it, but I don't know that they've done tons. I mean, I'm not a big fan of tons of customization. I mean, we only have so much time, right? But I did think that was a pretty cool aspect and a great way to connect with other people to talk about the students that we're serving.
on the topic of customizations, I talked to an ex-Libris guy who, when I mentioned that we do not have a network zone and we have 26 institutions and like only 3 sandboxes, and I'm kind of, like everybody's backup person and there's so many different, anyway, he was like, yes, I really want to figure out how to use the sandbox configuration export tool to allow people who administer several live environments to pull that information and then compare or standardize and then like apply it. And I was like, that would be really neat. Can we work together? Because then if someone has something cool that we do, or we want to integrate something across all of our institutions, it would not be everybody having to find the time. So
following up on Abby's comment about the usability testing, I went to one that it was billed as like moving over to Primo VE, but their concepts that they used were really cool, something I haven't tried before. And that's just doing like 2-minute to 5-minute impromptu tests with students out in the library. So they set up a table and they had a little sign that said free candy for 5 minutes of your time. And they would only pick like 2 things to ask people. And it was easy stuff like, which label do you like better, online access or access online? And how come you chose that? And I thought, oh my goodness, yeah, we want to do some usability testing, but to schedule like 30 minutes with a student and all of that just seemed like too much. But I took a lot away from that of just focusing on 1 or 2 things, and then you could immediately kind of take that back to your group and figure out what you wanted to do. So that was really helpful and doable.
I went to a session, totally now changing direction of things we learned, about a homemade OCLC reclamation project using APIs. And so like anyone who hasn't done an OCLC like sync up check thing, and or like wants to be able to do that relatively regularly, for whatever reason, I wrote down all the stuff and I have the GitHub thing, and yeah, so that would like, I was like, this is very cool because some of our I know I've, like I have been asked about getting more accurate results in WorldCat, and then this would directly relate also to getting accurate results in like Google Scholar. So I think that will be a really good project for me over the summer because it's going to take, it is Python and APIs. And he also mentioned that like basically every single step in the process iterates on the data that was created in the previous step. So if there was a mistake in the previous step, like that can just like avalanche or snowball, whatever. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, this is cool. Like if I could, this is like a hyper focus day, figure it out. So, and then I believe one of you asked me about making the A to Z list, and it may have been Yakima. I don't know if anyone from Yakima is here today. But basically instead of like if you have things in your A to Z list that maybe aren't activated in Alma, but you want to include them as results. So like a textbook vendor that you don't, like, or, some other weird kind of one-off thing that doesn't have portfolios, or like, I know teaching channel, it's like it's really for individual use, but you can have an institutional level subscription. Anyway, long and short, LibGuides has created an OAI PMH for the A to Z list. And then you can also create custom Dublin core fields to tag them as databases when you export, when they get imported into Primo, so that users can just search in Primo and get the database listings that you have in LibGuides, which I think, like you might not want to use it for all of them, but there might be ones that you specifically are like, well, that would be the only way that that's getting found in Primo. So I'd love to have a use case to problem solve that on, if anyone is interested. It seemed like LibGuides actually has quite a few newer OAI PMH stuff going on, and some of it only works at a certain level if you're a CMS subscriber. But most of it, at least the basic level, was there regardless. Also, they've figured out how to integrate libcal with Alma. So if you update your hours in Alma, it will go into libcal, and someone's like, cool, but could you switch that? Because it's easier to set hours in libcal than it is in Alma. But they're like, okay, yeah, we got this suggestion at the last, in-person Eluna, and the person wanted it to go the other direction, but overwhelmingly people are like, yeah, no, libcal to Alma. So she was like, I will take that back to the team. So yeah, so that's some cool stuff. Yeah.
I got kind of building on that OEI. So we have an institutional repository at Whatcom, and I know others are building or maybe have, but I haven't dedicated a lot of time, but I've not got the the harvesting working, but I do have a great slide deck that kind of had a step-by-step, of the process. So if anyone's interested, I definitely would. I'm going to make use of it. So this isn't for the LibGuide stuff. This is for an IR, just to be clear.
Well, and I think there were a lot of sessions where somebody kind of mentioned a use of whatever it was they were presenting on for IR, and it just kept reminding me that we don't have a lot of IRs in use, but we have folks who would like to have an IR, and that could be a consortium level thing, and then it would collective work, less effort. Open Archives Initiative Protocol for Metadata Harvesting, OAI PMH.
It's
I don't-
almost like Mark at this point. People just use the initialism or acronym or whatever it is. Like, I couldn't tell you what Mark stands for in Mark Records, but I got curious about what does OAI, like, I know it has something to do with sharing information, but what does that actually stand for? Now I know.
Yeah, I love this. I have notes, and then I'm like, what was this from?
I didn't go to a session on this, but I talked to a couple of vendors, and then I heard it kind of a librarian in a session saying the same thing, but I learned a little bit more about why Gale is such a nightmare as far as linking from Primo. And maybe you all knew this, but I didn't. Somebody explained it to me that basically when you when Primo goes out to get the article or, link to the article at the vendor's website, if you have multiple databases with them, say, with EBSCOhost or ProQuest, that's actually a collection of small databases. The vendor will, this is oversimplified, but basically the vendor recognizes that the request is coming from Olympic College, and the vendor knows, oh, Olympic College has these 6 databases with us. So even though they've trying to link to this one database, if that's a bad link or the wrong link, we're still going to link to the article in the correct database, because we understand all the products that this client is paying for from us, and we can link on the back end no matter what. So it was like, it doesn't really matter which of their links you click on or that is being used to retrieve the article, because any of them will get to it. Gale doesn't do that. First of all, they have crap metadata, and they don't do that. They don't look at all of the individual databases that the subscriber has. They only look at the specific one that was, called to get to that article. So there's a lot of invisible work with most of the other vendors that we're not seeing behind the scenes to get us a working link. And that doesn't happen with Gale at all. I talked to that vendor. I was Third Iron, that owns LibKey, and they had a meeting with Gale, I think he said in 2 weeks, to encourage them to do what everybody else does to try to make the linking better. But we'll see how far they get.
That's
He also
really
said that,
helpful information, Amy. Thank you.
yeah, I'm not describing in a very technical way, but but it was still interesting to me. And the LibKey vendor also said that, like us, where Washington State's database contract surprisingly got awarded to Gale, the same thing happened in another state recently. I can't remember if it was Florida or somewhere else. And again, everyone was surprised, including Gale, that they got it. So I think their capacity just isn't matching the size of their contract.
Yeah, well, and they clearly haven't trained their bid teams either. Like they just it doesn't seem like they have the same like formality of operational cooperation between like bid team, support team, product expert. Because like the bid included stuff that is not possible with Gale. Like I don't know where they got their description of what they could do. But yeah, anyway. Yeah, we gotta Will Stuavenga's still interested in coming to hear from us. So
Well, I thought it was just good to know that, I think I tend to jump to blaming Alma for a lot of things or blaming Ex Libris. And in this case, it sounds like, it's largely on Gale.
well, and I think from our Gale meetings, I remember them saying, oh, well, it's because Ex Libris goes and web scrapes and then they pick up stuff that isn't right and blah, blah, blah. And that probably just complicates the fact that they don't have that like back end architecture, because it's just adding more of those item specific, not cross identified type things. But interesting. Yeah, I guess I didn't ever think about how vendors built their links or like linking networks within their databases. Crazy.
I also asked, I grilled the just as an aside, the LibKey vendors quite a bit because their product was mentioned in a lot of sessions. A lot of libraries are using it and love it. It helps with the linking. And so I said, our pain points are Gale. And he was like, well, hopefully in the future, we'll be able to do something better, but it's kind of on them. And then I asked him about linking to book chapters and linking to reference entries. And he said straight up, like their product wouldn't actually be able to help with that.
Wow.
They're more about, they're more about articles, journal articles.
Yeah, one of the things that just kind of chiming in on what you were saying, Amy, that my librarians really like about Gale products, particularly for reference, is that they link at the article level, whereas reference books in ProQuest and reference books in EBSCO link at the title level. And so, yes, you can drill down, but in terms of pulling up the article level, they can't do that. And so we're talking about like looking at reference collections. It's like, ProQuest has an amazing reference collection, but it doesn't link out. But then I have the issue with Gale with the linking. I don't like the link outs in Gale in general. So like we have this kind of back and forth about love-hate relationship with Gale products. So
Melinda, I'll have to go back and check which session it was in. My head is still spinning and I walked into just like shit show yesterday. So I haven't gone back to look at my notes, but I did go to some session where they talked about a workaround for getting at article levels in your reference databases, or I think you could do it with any database, but basically, and again, I don't have the technical language, I don't have my notes, but basically you could create a custom link, in the record that, in addition to going out to the database, you could actually create your own. And what it does is it goes out to that database with the search string.
Yes.
It'll pull in your search term. And so basically, if you use that link, it will go out to that database and automatically run the search for the term that you have a record, an individual entry for. So it'll like kind of, rather than just taking you to the book level, it will take you to the book level and search so that at least what comes up for the patron is a results list in that reference book of the entries that are there. And hopefully the one you want is actually on the top. So it kind of cuts out that step of having the patron do the search again when they get out to the book.
That is constructing open URL something. And yeah,
Yeah, I downloaded all the slides from all the sessions I went to. If they had them and organized them, I just got to go back and look at them at some point.
I just remembered another thing that I thought could help with Gale linking. And this is that LibGuides is going to be introducing the ability to have multiple A to Z database lists. So you can have the one that's visible on your full A to Z database page, but then if you wanted to create one of like every single stupid micro collection from Gale, or of, you know, like different more like reference specific stuff or whatever, you can have all these extra lists and use them on your LibGuides, but they would have that OAI PMH linking ability to Primo. So, you know, like you could essentially you could use Gale to export like all the data on the micro collections and give a bunch of Dublin core tags, make that a new A to Z list in LibGuides, so it's not visible every time someone goes to your A to Z list, but it's another A to Z list, and it functions the way, you know, their database ones instead of asset ones. And then you could use the OAI to then pull that into Primo with the metadata that you added, if that makes sense. Not still doesn't solve all the problems. But I was always frustrated by the fact that like you want people to be able to get to a specific you know, like disciplinary collection, and in LibGuides you have to make it an asset if you don't want it to show up on the full A to Z guide list. But then if you need to like change your proxy information, like it's two different processes between assets and A to Z lists. So now with this new ability to make multiple A to Z lists, that should be a little simplified too. But okay, do I have
Just a quick plug. I did go to a session on the very last day about accession planning for electronic services librarians, and just keeping in mind that you might not be here forever by choice or not by choice. And that if your library, like most of ours probably, is not great at cross training and documentation. So something to think about, to take on a bit at a time, maybe have a goal a month to document a certain process. Keep it in a print binder as well as keeping it online somewhere, letting somebody know where it is. Yeah, so just a quick plug for, I know that just takes a lot of time and effort, but it can be really helpful. A few people in the session came into their jobs after the position had been empty for 5 or 7 years. So not only was there no documentation that was accurate, but also Alma and Primo had not been maintained at all in that time. So there were just tons and tons of cleanup projects that they had to do. And, you know, so anyway.
I proposed a 90-minute workshop at the WLA ACRL fall conference on documenting. So, because I was one of those people that came into a library and had no accurate documentation. But yeah, a little at a time, and printing things out, showing them to other people is also a great tip. because it might make perfect sense to you, and then someone else has no idea. But anywho, yeah, so I kind of figured today would be a little like popcorn, as we all likely came back to at least some level of turbulence yesterday. But based on chat, there's definitely some interest in a couple things, and I can summarize and maybe send out a little email. But maybe on Thursday, we can focus on a few of the things that people were of particular interest to, because like Kirsty mentioned in chat, the way to keep ebook records in CDI from duplicating, and I was in that session of Knowledge Days as well, so like maybe we can do like a little demo of that, or like if you saw something really cool in one of your sessions that you'd want to give like a little 5-minute demo on, and we can do a little more like kind of demoing of things we found with a little more prep time. And I did not go to Melinda and Karen or Kirsty's presentations. So
I'm gonna give a plug for both of them. It was really handy, like in Kirsty's, to understand conceptually what is happening with electronic collections. And I've been working with it for a while, but it's like, oh, just kind of it was just wonderful. And then we don't have acquisitions right now at Wacom, so I really appreciate, speaking of documentation, the work that Melinda and Karen did to during their presentation, what they shared and experiences, both of them plus.
Thanks. I missed Kirsty's as well. I wish I had gone to it, but Karen went to it. We divided and conquered at that one because there were like 3 sessions that all needed to be kind of gone to. There was one that I went to, and I don't know how many of you guys are involved with corrections, but it was basically, there was a session on providing access to resources for incarcerated students. And I know that here, that is an issue because I think we're the last in the state that the last prison in the state right now that doesn't even give access to physical computers of any kind, intranet or not. And so they're working on trying to get a plan together. And this actually gives a kind of intermediary way to give access to both your library's resources as well as like JSTOR indexes without internet. And so it was very, very cool. And I'd love to, I can, share that presentation. It's pretty straightforward, but it was really cool if any of you guys have that population.
And EBSCO, actually, I just met with George and someone else from EBSCO. They have developed an integration that allows prisons to basically get the index of the EBSCO content that the library subscribes to, and then then it's connected, like during off times or whatever, it sends the request through prison administration to approve the request, and then it automatically gets downloaded from the library and delivered as the print thing or whatever, so that and George was like, yeah, it's not even anything that your libraries need to do. Like, I just need help connecting with the prisons that your libraries work with. And we can then help them. We've got most of it, like it's just a little tweak to get it set up for different prisons. So that was, I think, services for incarcerated students, because Overdrive, who was not at eLuna, I didn't see anyone from Overdrive, but they're also doing some stuff with that allows access to materials that have been approved for the site. So prison administration can choose which titles. And then again, it's like they view the index and then it gets delivered. So it's not a live internet connection. So
JSTOR, so this actually, the way they do things is they basically load everything on the front end and send the computers off. And then they have to take a thumb drive over and they update everything. But it's a searchable, both of them are searchable. There's a searchable, basically the library catalog. So they've set it up that they can search their Primo, essentially a version of their Primo at the indexing level and abstracting level. And then they also have a JSTOR. JSTOR has a platform basically that they provide for free to prisons that essentially load everything onto a thumb drive. And if a student wants something, it can go through a process of like, getting approved, and like a student can go and get the information and bring it back, or the instructor or what have you brings it back at that point. But they then have the experience of that searching process. But the cool thing was that it was free. It wasn't something that they had to pay for.
yes, I would love to recruit Melinda and Karen to repeat their presentation on a call. I think I've got Wacom and Yakima who would like to implement acquisitions. So might have a little cohort, but maybe with Melinda and Karen's wonderful documentation and explanation, more people would be on board to join up and activate. Okay, it's 10:46, and it's, yeah, for those of us who just got back from traveling, I hope not everyone came back into chaos. I'm sorry, Amy, that was your experience. But I am eager to put together like a few demos, so I'll prep a few things. And if other folks want to prep a few things, and then we can like show you some stuff. So, and if you have questions, send them out to the list or send them to me. And we'll see what we can't like put together to keep sharing out this knowledge. One last little plug / announcement question. So my vacation, 3 meetings. I can start next Thursday. I don't know if I'll like stick around. But the 2 meetings the week of Memorial Day and then the Tuesday after that, June 6th. Does someone want to be the co-host so you can start the meeting so if people want to get on and discuss anything? Like anyone? Anyway, you don't have to volunteer now. Take a look at your calendars. If you're gonna be there, even for one of the meetings, I can just add you and then you're able to start it and people can discuss. Or they'll just be canceled. That's also.
This is, sorry, I started checking email and like moving to the next. So you want to post the dates, I'll double check them.
Okay.
I'm open to co-hosting if I'm going to be around, and then if we don't need to meet, we'll just move on.
Yeah, it's just like a start the meeting. Does anyone need to discuss anything? Yeah. So, okay, I'll send those out. Oh, Amy. Yeah, plumbing. Yeah. So, okay, everybody take care and we'll learn cool things. Bye.